Okay, you know what, the first take was fine. Today we're going to be looking at the diminished playing of Brian Setzer. Now if you thought that that was me saying Brian Setzer's playing was diminished, I apologise. I know it's the whole sort of the clickbait thing, but you know, there's so many videos on YouTube and I really want you to watch mine, and I know you're going to get really good value out of it, especially if you're a budding guitar player or you're working at that sort of sound and style. So please forgive me, his playing has not diminished, but we are going to be talking about his diminished playing. So it's a pretty legit title, to be honest. So the diminished scale is a kind of scale. We're not actually going to look too deeply into the theory today. We're really just going to look at how Brian Setzer applies it. And I will teach you like one version of the diminished scale that you can use. But we're going to look sort of in terms of chords and structures, where he places that and how you can use it. Okay, so there's three scenarios where Brian Setzer will typically use a diminished scale. And the most obvious one is if a progression has a diminished chord, it fits right in. So if you've been trying to figure out how to use the diminished scale in a progression that doesn't have a diminished chord, that's a slightly different challenge. So first we're going to talk about progressions with it, and then I'm essentially going to teach you how progressions that don't have it could in theory have it, and that's another great way that we can use a diminished scale. Okay, so that's kind of going to be your part one and part two. Part one being, you know, when we have a diminished chord, we can use a diminished scale, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And part two being, if you don't have a diminished chord, where can we basically insert one where it may not seem to belong. So the very first thing I want to show you guys is a progression you're probably familiar with. If you're familiar with Two Hip Gotta Go, okay, that classic Hot Licks video that we've probably all seen. I remember getting that on tape from the janitor at the school that I worked at, the gardener, Ralph. Ralph, if you're watching, thanks again. I actually reached out to him recently to thank you. So a gardener gave me that tape for Two Hip Gotta Go, that tutorial, because he saw me playing in the school band and recognised a bit of rockabilly stuff going on. And he gave me that tape, and I only vaguely remember it now, but the part of the song I wanted to show you was the bit where it goes... hang on, how's it go? Okay, forgive me, I haven't played it for a long time, but I know the tune in my head, and I actually saw a really cool video of someone playing it recently. I've got a rough idea how it goes, but what I wanted to talk about, the important thing, was where it goes from the C. Okay, so have a look at this chart here. You can see, I'm going to put a little chart. So we've got a G chord. Have a look at the notes in that G chord. Okay, we're going to go to a C chord. Now I'm just playing a C major, but whether it's a C7 or C9 doesn't really matter right now. I want to show you something. When we go to a C sharp diminished, okay, notice that all we've done is take the C and move it up one. Okay, and you can see it's actually just a C7 chord, right, with that note moved up. Now what that note's doing is it's moving us towards a D, okay, which is inside the G chord. So that is one way we see a diminished chord used a lot. That's been done since probably the 20s, maybe earlier. So that concept is not new, but of course it provides us a great opportunity to play diminished ideas over. So just to recap, I'll play that again. So it sort of goes from, if I simplify, it goes from a G to a G7, and then it goes to a C, let's say a C7, to a C sharp diminished, and you can hear there's movement that takes us back to G. It doesn't feel fully resolved, and it never really is in that scenario. It's not the end of the progression. So we do that, and then we're back to G, and then the chord would be a D7, back to G. So obviously if you've got a progression like that, or if you've written a progression like that, on that C sharp chord, the C sharp diminished, okay, I need my pick back now, playing without it, you can use the diminished arpeggio, and that's one of the easiest ways. So that makes perfect sense, okay? And I'll just show you really quick that little diminished scale that I played. I'll put a little chart up. Oh. Okay, let me play that again. Okay, let me play that again and a little bit slower as well. Okay, it's just the chords spread out in single notes. Okay, so there you go. That's one scenario that Brian Setzer regularly uses, that diminished scale. Django Reinhardt did it. Charlie Christian did it. I think Cliff Gallup used it. A lot of guys used it. It's a really cool little thing, and Brian Setzer has taken it and run with it. It's a great concept. So now the other occasion that we might use a diminished arpeggio, okay, is on the 5 chord. Now I've talked about this many times in a lot of my videos. Here's the 1 chord, here's the 4 chord, 1 chord, and 5 chord. Okay, and those numbers come off the major scale. And I'm going to talk about it. My Rockabilly Rebuild course breaks all of that down and explains what the 1, the 2, the flat 3, the 3, teaches that language, so it makes these conversations a little bit easier, but don't run off. You don't have to know it right now. At least if you know 1 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, okay? You'll hear it in every blues, that last chord before it comes back to the 1, okay? You know, you'll hear that. There it is, okay? It's that resolving chord, okay? So when we get that tension of that resolving chord, because that's essentially what's going on, the diminished chord actually works really well on that one. And it's simply because if I play the 5 chord, let's say we play a D9, okay? If I play a D dominant 7 arpeggio and I just highlight that chord, okay, so hopefully you can see that on the chart there. Well, if I actually just take the first note of that, the D, and I raise it 1, okay, let's play that a little slower. Okay, it's a D sharp diminished. It could also be considered an F sharp diminished, or an A diminished, or a C diminished, or an E flat diminished. D sharp diminished, same thing, okay? Because the notes all move up 3 frets at a time every single time, it's a symmetrical shape. There's no change to that pattern, so any of the notes could essentially be the root note. I know, it's crazy. I'm not going to get into it. I've got a video where I talk about all this stuff. You know, I'll put it in below, another video talking about diminished scales and the crazy things that go on with them. But it is it's a bit more theoretical. Today I'm just going to give you some tips for applying this. So when you're on the 5 chord, or you're thinking about the 5 chord and you're soloing, if you are thinking about that, which I highly advise, you can play off the 1 higher from the root note of the 5 chord, okay, and use a diminished arpeggio. Or you can play off the 3rd degree. So if you can figure out where the 3rd degree of your chords are, it's a great launching point for the diminished arpeggio. Also the 5th degree. So in this case, the D, we want to play up the semitone from there, okay? But if you look at this little triad of a D7, and you can see the F sharp, okay, we can launch a diminished idea off of that, okay? Which is just the scale you looked at before, and it's going to sound great. And you can do that off any chord, any dominant 7 chord. So any chord like a G7, G9, G13, G11, anything where it's like the chord, root note, and then a number, that is a chord you can use this concept from by just going up a semitone, okay, and playing the diminished arpeggio from there, or playing off the 3rd degree or the 5th degree. So the 3rd degree is here, or the 5th degree is here, okay? And you know, because it's there, the other notes in the chord, in the simple chords, or in the dominant 7 chord, any of the notes in the dominant 7 chord except the root note, you can play a diminished arpeggio off. So that is some really useful advice if you're able to focus and hear that out. I know it's not the simplest concept, but if you understand that, you can practice your diminished arpeggio and then start using them. So I'll just give you an example, and I'll just talk you through. So on the C7, and And then, but I'm not going to use the concept just on a C7 out of nowhere. This one moves to the C sharp, as in the example of Two Hip Gotta Go. Okay, so there's a C sharp diminished. I'm going to play an idea. And then we're back to the G. And then I'm just playing an arpeggio. And then on the D7, I'm going to play off any of those chord tones other than the root note, or I'm going to play up a semitone higher than the root note. So, okay, I threw some extra notes in between, which you can also do. You don't need to overthink it. You can throw notes in between because it's a wide stepping between the notes. If you throw a note in between those, it just adds a little bit of extra color. And I can get into the theory of that, but again, there's not really any need to. You know, if you just practice with the arpeggio. Okay, and then the only other challenge that this lesson's not going to cover today is from that scale, from that diminished arpeggio, you really want to walk into something that is important to the chord we're going to, in this case G. So I would be looking for, okay, the flat 3 and the major 3 of the G. Now you're probably going, I don't know what a flat 3 and a major 3rd is. I teach that in the Rockabilly Rebuild course, but let's just do this right now so you take something away from this that's really useful. Okay, look at the notes in this chord. Okay, look at the notes in that chord. Any of the notes in that chord, if you can walk into one of those off that scale, is going to sound good. Okay. See, that's in the chord. So that's my big tip there if you are doing off that scenario where you're playing off of the 5 chord and you're resolving. You know, you want to walk into an important note of that chord. Same with this, with the, you know, hey, I'm playing on a diminished chord. I can see C, C sharp diminished. I'm going to use a C sharp diminished arpeggio. You want to walk into notes that are important to that chord or chord tones of the next chord. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So that's it, guys. They're the main examples. Now, if you've really enjoyed this, I'm going to put an extra lesson on my Patreon. Okay, and I'll also put it on the YouTube. I'll put it on the YouTube membership channel as well. So if you're either on the Patreon or the YouTube membership channel or the website, I'll put it up on those 3. I'm going to do an extra lesson just for my paid members where I walk you through some different ways to play the diminished scales, or the diminished arpeggio. There's only a few ways to play it, but if you cover the 3 or 4 different variations, you've kind of got it down all over the neck. So that video is going to be on my Patreon, YouTube, the YouTube membership platform, which I've forgotten what it's actually called again, and or my website. So if one of those platforms suits you. My website does house Rockabilly Rebuild, and I am also going to be doing a beginner jazz swing course that will be up there as well. So check that out, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to play you out. Let's just jam over that progression I was talking about and have a little fun. Yeah, moves quick, that one. See you guys in the next one.